James, welcome to the podcast. For those who aren't familiar with how we do things at Goal Assist, we have a brilliant podcast with brilliant executives across the football industry. And for those who really want to engage and network with these people, we run a community alongside this, and each of our guests do a live Q&A to join the community and help answer any questions that they may have. So if you're someone that wants to network with executives in football, please check out the link below. Other than that, James, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
For those who may not be aware of your background, can you give people a bit of a sense of how you got to where you've got to?
Yeah, so by trade, I'm a qualified solicitor. Must say, when I was looking at a career in law, I never anticipated that it would culminate in me being the head of legal effectively at a championship football club, but that's where I am. So to give the kind of long answer, really, I studied law at university. Like most law students who wanted to pursue a career in law, I applied for training contracts. I got a training contract, a city firm in London called Field Fisher, usual kind of commercial corporate world, medium to large size firm. At that point, no idea that sport was really even a route I could go down. But in my first actually training seat, one of the senior associates was doing little bits of sports work, and he's gone on to be a fairly prominent sports law partner at another firm. That really opened my eyes to the area. So I started doing bits of work with him, started kind of going to events, reading around the subjects, and realised that was 2013 when this area was really starting to pick up. So I qualified there, was there for 2.5 years, and then I moved to a firm which specialises in sports law called Onside Law. So I was there for 6.5 years. I was working in football, rugby, cricket, with sport golf, and loads of other smaller sports. I worked with international federations, governing bodies, in particular clubs, players, and agents. From that, I worked for a couple of Premier League teams as an external lawyer. Did lots of work with agents, some players, brands adjacent to football, and really going into a club was kind of the natural progression of that. I'd always known that I didn't want to be a private practice lawyer my entire career. I wanted to work in-house, and it was just really a case of waiting for the right opportunity to come up. And I was very lucky that an excellent job came up at Norwich, went for the job, got the job, and here I've got no connection to Norwich or Norfolk, didn't have any friends or family up there, so I've moved the whole family. But it's always nervous when you take a kind of big leap from something you've been doing for a good 10 years into something that's very different. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I always say that working in a football club is the most palatable way to be a lawyer. You still get the boring bits of it, but it's just a fantastic industry to work in. In terms of the sports law industry, football's pretty much at the forefront of it. It's where most of the advances are made, most of the interesting cases. I know there's loads of stuff going on in other sports, but it really is a kind of a dynamic and engaging area to work in. So yeah, I feel really lucky and privileged to have been able to get into this area.
I agree from a legal point of view for a lot of people that I speak to in that space. Football does seem to be the driving area of innovation and interesting cases. In terms of a day-to-day, if you're someone that is looking to get into this space, it's something that they'd like to do in the future, or you might be currently working at a law firm but looking to move into football or sport in general, what does the day-to-day of a sports lawyer, football lawyer look like? What sort of things are you getting involved with?
It sounds a bit of a cliche, but there is not really any particular day, and a lot of it is really reactive. The industry moves so fast that literally anything can happen. I mean, a couple of years ago when I joined, I was going from working on the investment of the ownership group that was coming in, and that was a huge transaction. And the next minute I was renewing the license for the grounds and borehole at the training grounds. It goes from the sublime to the ridiculous. A lot of people see a football club and they think, transfer, player contract, arbitrations, all this kind of stuff. It's essentially like being an in-house lawyer or any business. You've just got the kind of football element tacked onto it. So you've still got the employment bits, you've still got your day-to-day operational aspects of being the sole kind of in-house lawyer at a football club, but generally kind of split into 3 buckets. I would say you've got commercial, football, and governance. Really, obviously on the commercial side, that's ultimately running the business, whether that's from partnerships, whether that's ticket sales, whether that's kind of the conferencing and hospitality stuff that goes on around the business. So that's a real kind of key driver, because obviously that's where the fundamentals of our revenue comes from. And then you've got the football side, which is your transfers, your playing contracts, agents, disciplinary work, doing bits with the academy, with the women's team. We've even got community and football development programs going on all around the east of England, also kind of as far down as Surrey at the moment. And then aside from it, you've got the general kind of governance of the business. So you've got corporate governance, board meetings, HR, safeguarding, all those kind of things. So it's a real broad spectrum of things. And I know if you go to a lot of football clubs, they might have quite big legal teams and we have specialists in particular areas. I'm quite lucky, and it's also slightly terrifying at times, but I get to do the kind of full gambit of the stuff that comes across the desk. It keeps you really engaged, really motivated. It's really difficult to say days will. I mean, there are certain periods of the season where you see more times where, like, for example, this time of year, you're going to see a lot of partnership renewals, a lot of new suppliers coming in, obviously a lot of stuff around the transfer window, player contracts. We see a lot of that, and people often say to me when the season ends, you've got a couple of weeks off. Now, actually, when the season ends, that's when things really start gearing up because there's so much to do to prepare for a new season. I mean, we've sacked our manager at the end of the last 2 seasons, so that brings a whole host of issues with it and loads of work. And so actually this time of year in the summer is one of the most challenging, not necessarily because the work's harder or more technical, but just because the sheer volume of it makes it challenging, and obviously the turnaround time, everything has to happen immediately. So it's a real difficult period to get through, and you've got to be really organised. Then when you get into the season, I tend to find actually it levels off a little bit. There are spikes when you might have a particular disciplinary issue or around our AGM and that kind of stuff. But actually during the season, things calm down. You can start getting into the long list and doing those change projects to improve processes or kind of modify the way we're working around the business. So it's yeah, it's certainly keeps you on my toes.
What makes a good governance department work? Like,
I think there's kind of 2 major factors really. I think the first factor is a kind of a lateral one where all of the departments really work very effectively together. Obviously, there's times when that doesn't always happen. It's the same as any business, but we're all pretty well aligned. We communicate really well, and we're very good at making sure the football side of the business and the business side are well connected. Loads of people from Carrow Road go down and work regularly over the Avant Training Centre where the football operations are based, so that there is that connection between both of them. Chatting to colleagues, I think sometimes they can be quite separate and siloed and really don't speak or get on very well. So we do that quite effectively. And then when you look kind of vertically going up through the layers of the business, obviously we've got kind of rank and file members of staff, and we've got the senior leadership team, the exec team, and all the way up to board. It's pretty well aligned in terms of what those structures are. To the extent when we get up to board level, at our board meetings, we've got all of the exec team members which oversee all of the departments of the business, and certainly in terms of key risk areas, all of that is getting reported into board. We all sit on board so we can explain what's happening in our areas of business and be part of that debate rather than it being closed off. I think a lot of clubs, kind of the senior executives, sometimes might not all be at board meetings, and it means that we have that dialogue and everyone's oversight of what's going on, which can then permeate across the business, and making sure that at board level the directors have clarity in terms of what's happening in all aspects of the business. So I think the structure we've got there in those reporting lines is really helpful for making sure that everyone knows where they stand, where it fits into the overall direction of travel for the club, and making sure that people are working collaboratively rather than in silos.
no, I think that's really important. One of the things in which, so when I was obviously back at the EFL, one of the things that I do think the EFL did very well, especially during the transfer season, was doing these sort of morning meetings where everyone from each department that was subject to the transfers would come in, sit down, discuss. This is a list of things that we need to achieve today, because it was such a, obviously, day by day in the transfer window. But having that open communication and making sure that there's fluidity and everybody knows how each person impacts the overall result of what we're working on, I think is really important. The one thing that I also want to talk about is I feel like a lot of football operations can be very reactive. How much can be done in preparation?
I mean, where we try, well, we can be proactive in terms of aspects of the business we're focusing on, we will be. So, for example, in terms of modelling out our P&S compliance, that's a really big thing for us. And we are looking multiple seasons ahead. So we know what we have to do on a kind of window to window basis. And the same with our transfers. We're planning a couple of windows in advance in terms of targets. We're looking at the kind of way that our squad may develop, which players may go, which players may come through those succession pathways to being first team players, so that we can actually think strategically about the options we take rather than thinking like, oh God, we've got a huge P&S hole that we need to fill, and you're reacting to try and do any transaction you can to comply. So with those kind of things, we really try to be really, really proactive to make sure that we're not being caught on the hop, and that creates stability. And that stability, I think, is what leads to success, because if you've got instability, everything's really turbulent, it's difficult to get that forward momentum. But obviously, given the nature of the industry, things are really reactive. Things can happen that you're not expecting to, and you have to try and adjust to it as quickly as possible. So it comes with the territory. So as much as we can plan and prepare, we will do. But by the very kind of nature of it, we're chasing our tails at certain things, and you have to drop everything you're doing to kind of pick up I don't know whether it's a disciplinary issue or a dispute or whatever else. You've just got to work with it.
It's great to hear someone say forecasting and looking forward on P&S submissions and compliance. Obviously, that was the area in which I was responsible for enforcing when I was at the EFL. And now we work closely with football clubs to help them with compliance across all the different types of financial regulations. When it comes to moving from P&S, which is a profit-based regulation, to EFL squad cost ratio, which is more of an income-based regulation. What planning and what things are you trying to do to navigate that change?
I think it's something that we've been aware of as a club for a while. And obviously, UEFA have moved to a squad cost model. The Premier League have started looking at it. It's only natural the EFL are going to start looking at it as well. And we're making sure that we're thinking how our setup is going to fit within that regulatory system if and when it comes in. If you look at it, it kind of makes sense to go to a squad cost model, because then you're not going to have a situation where, as maybe the case under P&S, that clubs may look to cut back in certain areas. Obviously, like capital expenditure spending and academy spending can be excluded to certain extent from P&S. But if if you're thinking I'm going to hold back on my marketing team just to try and save some pennies here and there, those kind of concerns fall away with SER, and there's a lot to be said for SER for encouraging clubs to look at ways in which they can diversify their income. You can always see that the clubs are doing this because it's encouraging you to generate more, sweat your assets more effectively, so you can spend more in your club. I guess if you were going to be critical, you would say maybe it reinforces natural kind of hierarchies of size amongst clubs, because there's always going to be clubs in a league. Take, for example, Leeds last year, they're always, no matter what a Plymouth does, going to be able to generate far more in terms of revenues. It could enforce that, but ultimately it's going to try and encourage clubs to move to that. So I think it's probably a good thing. Obviously, it's going to be difficult to get to that because there are some clubs who are going to prefer P&S because it works for them. Some are going to prefer SCR, but I think SCR seems the direction of travel. But as everybody's seen in the press, there's still a long way to go, certainly at Premier League level, for that to become a regulation which is enforced. You've got the self-interest of the clubs in needing 14 clubs, I think it is, to vote in favour of it to be passed. You've got issues that will be there with the PFNCC in terms of the effect on the players, feel it has on them from an economic perspective, and whether or not they may look to challenge that on competitional grounds. The direction of travel is towards that, but whether or not we'll get to a position where it comes into force, certainly at a domestic level, because obviously it already is for European competitions, and whether or not there'll be any challenges to that, it's still quite a long way to go.
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting space. I mean, how sort of regulations would work for those who are listening, because obviously I know you'll be aware of this. Essentially, how financial regulations came into football, it's almost like UEFA set the regulations, and then to a certain extent, the Premier League have to align with UEFA because they have so many clubs now competing in UEFA competition. It makes sense for those regulations to be aligned, because you won't want to be passing one but failing another. And again, the Championship and the Premier League, because of the relationship between the EFL and the Premier League, the Championship has to align with the Premier League, and that's why you see profitability and sustainability rules in the Premier League and Championship. And then League One and League Two, the EFL have more control over and can sort of force what they deem fit, and obviously the clubs vote on. And obviously that's why you see salary cost management protocol in League One and League Two. The EFL squad cost ratio that's coming through is much more similar to the SCMP model than a PNS model. And I think having that alignment through the pyramid is only going to help. Where are your thoughts on when the independent regulator get involved in this space? What do you think are going to be the biggest challenges for clubs?
It's still to be seen what the regime's going to look like. We've obviously been given lots of advanced kind of briefing in terms of the approach the regulator will want to take. There's a lot of stress from them that it's going to be light touch regulation, and that obviously it's going to be proportionate to the scale of the clubs and where they are in the pyramid. I think that the key thing is going to be ensuring that there's no duplication. As I understand, there's going to be kind of a real concerted effort between the regulator and the EFL, certainly to make sure that that isn't the case. As I said earlier, we're pretty proactive in terms of our kind of financial reporting and making sure that we do things as early as possible. I think it shouldn't really change a great deal for us because we're quite on it, but it really depends what the regime is going to look like. So I think, yeah, it really depends. I'm hugely close because our finance team tend to do all of the heavy lifting. I only get involved where I absolutely have to. But I feel the feeling I get from them is that they're relatively comfortable, but it still depends to be seen what the regime looks like. In terms of the licensing, yeah, it's still not entirely clear what that's going to involve, but I would expect that it's not going to prove particularly difficult for us to comply. I mean, I think certainly in terms of corporate governance, water engagement aspects of it, we're fairly far ahead and we're doing a lot of that stuff already. So hopefully it shouldn't change too much for us. But again, it's going to be something that develops over time based upon the experiences they have with clubs and can look to expand in certain spaces, look to maybe not do as much in other spaces. So I think certainly something that's going to be ever changing over time as they kind of understand how they apply it to football.
Some clubs are far more prepared from what they naturally already had in place compared to other clubs, and some of it's resource. And like I say, I think that proportionality aspect of the regulator is really key to make sure that those clubs, either those that are just have built less around this side of their organization, or clubs who are lower down the pyramid and just naturally have less resource in this space, are given the right guidance and the right support on this matter. Moving away from the finance stuff, there's lots of different areas of law that obviously will fall under your remit. Where, from a safeguarding aspect, what can clubs do more from a governance point of view to help improve safeguarding at clubs?
I'm quite lucky because safeguarding reports into me, so that is an area of the business where I'm fairly comfortable with. And I've only been at the club for 2 years now, but our head of safeguarding, well, he's actually rebranded the department to Safer Sport, so it kind of safeguarding gives kind of a certain impression of what it involves, but we've rebranded as Safer Sport to kind of create an atmosphere around the club where it's everybody's business and it's something that actually feeds into the sporting performance of the club rather than just being a kind of a supporter kind of facing thing. But it's super important, and our head of Safe Sports taken us from a position where it was really just a DBS box ticking exercise to where it's across the club. It's one of our key risks, and it's something that's really at the forefront of people's mind. So what we have is a safeguarding panel, and as part of that, there's various designated safeguarding officers for various aspects of the business. So that'll be the academy, the women's team, foundation, the operational part of the business, and below them they will have a kind of safeguarding officer group who kind of assist the designated safeguarding officers who aren't safeguarding professionals, I should add. It's, for example, in our women's team, the DSO is our head of women's football, and they make sure from kind of an operational perspective in those various areas that we're all making sure that we're acting in a safe way. So that makes them from making sure we're using safe recruitment processes, making sure that we're reporting on any potential safeguarding incidents, whether that's as little as a child coming to one of our foundation events so they don't have bottled water on a really, really hot day. So you're really focusing on the low level stuff. So actually it builds a culture where people are always looking out for safeguarding, because obviously there was loads of stuff in the press in recent years about historical safeguarding issues and child sexual abuse, and nobody wants to be in that position. And actually, as a club, we have a large number of our academy players who may be from outside of the area and they're living in club accommodation with host families, and that presents a massive risk for us. It's really, really important to us that we create a safe environment that children and families, more importantly, want their young children to be a part of. So it's really important that we make sure we're seen to be doing the right thing here. And we've got to the point now where we've gone from a really underdeveloped kind of safeguarding provision to where we're actually seen amongst the EFL as a bit of a gold standard in terms of what you can do. People come to us to ask how we do certain things, get our opinion on things. We're actually seen as a bit of a leader in the field now, so it's really an area that we focused on, and it's really, really important to all clubs to focus on it. As you say, it's like anything throughout the pyramid. It comes down to resourcing. It's often a role safeguarding that's tacked on to somebody else's job, whether they're a academy manager or whether they're a HR person. We want specific professionals in this, but it's really, really important that there is somebody, where possible, in the organisation who specifically focuses on that. And from our kind of internal risk perspective, it's something that's on our risk register. It's something we report on at every board meeting. There will always be information about our safeguarding provision at every board meeting the board will be aware of. And to the extent there's any key risks that need to be flagged, I will speak about them at board meetings. So it's something to take really, really seriously. It's something that, frankly, all clubs are taking really seriously.
Norwich is a brilliant example of a football club that went from how you worded it, almost like a box-ticking DVS type. We do it and we tick the boxes, but we don't have a grasp on what best practice looks like and how we can excel at this, to a football club that is seen as the one of the best across the whole of the EFL. If you were a football club at the start of that journey, or maybe partway through that journey, what would be the key areas that a football club should be assessing to ensure that they're moving in the right direction?
For me, one of the most fundamental things is making sure that there's board and executive buy-in, because culture will start from the top. And if the board take it seriously and treat it as one of the club's key risks, then everybody below should be focusing on that. So getting that board buy-in is really, really important. I think from the bottom, just having a culture where people feel comfortable to report safeguarding risks.
Apologies, everyone. We've had a technical fault. We're back up and running now. Slightly different format, but we're still continuing our conversation with James. So we talked about safeguarding and how important that is for clubs to get right, and the impact of that, and also some best practices, making sure you get board buy-in and making sure that culture is passed through the club, and making sure that you have reporting on all elements to do with safeguarding, and making sure that you take everything from the minor incident of the young child that's turned up to the community event without a bottle of water on a warm day, making sure that everything is being noticed, reported, making sure that people feel that they have the confidence to speak up and raise any concerns. I think that's really good guidance. Another area which it isn't safeguarding, but I suppose does overlap because there will be safeguarding issues that are impacted, is supporter engagement. What differences have you seen at Norwich during your time on this side, and what things are you looking at to progress how the club reports and speaks to the fans?
We've got a fairly strong supporter engagement structure. So we've had an official supporters panel for the last 3 years. It's made up of a mixture of individual supporters who are voted by their fellow fans. So around about this time last year, we had a request for applications to join the panel, and then that was whittled down, and then a number of them went to a fan vote, and the fans could then vote on who they wanted to be the representatives on the panel. And then there's a number of representatives from various fan groups. So, for example, the Canaries Trust, which is our biggest supporters trust, we've got members from Her Game 2, from Forces to Canaries, which is our armed forces supporters group. So there's a real broad range of representation. And how that works is that on a quarterly basis, the panel will meet with various people from the club, primarily with our head of supporter engagement, but also our exec director will attend those meetings. I've attended those meetings. Our FD and commercial director will also attend if there's matters that are relevant to them. And what we'll try and do with those meetings is put issues on the table which are kind of relevant to us in the short to medium term, which we want to get their input on. And they will also bring issues that matter to them and to the fan base. So we can then have that dialogue. We'll take away then the suggestions they have for us, whether it's in relation to the matters that we've proposed and vice versa, and then look at how we can factor that in and get some added value from that relationship. It's a really good way to engage. Alongside that, we've tried to start setting up various working groups. So, for example, we have a working group at the moment for food and beverage. So it's a mixture of supporter panel members and other members or other supporters who are interested in that area, so that we can talk about what are the kind of issues with the food and beverage provision we have around the club, what things they would like to see, how we can make it more effective. And that's the sort of thing we're going to try and roll out more, because then you've got people in the fan base who are interested or passionate about a certain area who are inputting, and that helps us get that two-way feedback. So that's a really, really important way of us kind of having an understanding of what the fan base wants and for them to connect with us. And then alongside that, we have ongoing dialogue with various groups. Primarily, we'll have dialogue with the Canaries Trust, who we meet and speak to on a regular basis about all sorts of issues, again, relevant to them, that we may want to get their opinion on. So we can make sure we have that two-way relationship. And it's not just within those kind of organised formal meetings. We'll have that dialogue throughout the season. So if an issue comes up and the chair of the supporter panel wants to reach out to us, we'll then speak to them in relation to those matters. So it's a really effective way of hearing what they have to say and getting their input. It's one part of the things that we're trying to do to reach the fan base, because it's really important to get that feedback. And there'll be other things that we do throughout the year to try and have engagement with fans. We recently had a fans forum, which was attended by our own exec director, sporting director, and the new manager, which was an open floor led by BBC Radio Norfolk, so they could have a full Q&A with them. We'll have a similar forum at our AGM where shareholders can ask any questions they want. We'll have other forums around particular specific topics throughout the year, so there'll be an accessibility forum for our disabled fans. We'll try and have dialogue with young supporters throughout the year to understand matters that are relevant to them. So we're always trying to engage with them as much as they can. I think it's really important that clubs do that, because you need to make sure that you are serving your fans, who are your customers and the people who turn up week in, week out. So you need to make sure that you're giving them what they want, not just what you think they want.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's good to hear that the amount of engagement that the club's doing and how embedded it is to the operations, but also the fact that the whole match day experience and how the club operates, the fact that it's all being built around the fans and their perspectives and their feedback, and even to the food and beverage example, I think is one of those things that can be overlooked, but it's actually quite a big part of a fan's experience of a football club. Getting that insight directly from the fans is only going to help accelerate the club's perception and growth, because of the fact that you'll be able to deliver what the fans want more clearly. I think that's a really good approach. For clubs that they may not agree with some of the fans, or they may feel that, it slows down processes in an industry that needs to be reacting quickly. What can you say about the tangible value that you've gained from operating the way in which you have with the closeness with your fan base?
I haven't got any one particular example that comes to mind, because I think generally it's going to be just that conversation and bouncing ideas around and trying to work through solutions. I wouldn't give any particular example at the moment that comes to mind. But I would say, obviously, going back to what you said about other clubs who think it may slow things down, it just comes down to organisation. Clubs will know pretty far out from wanting to implement a significant change, whether it's an infrastructure change, whether it's a change to ticketing prices. They know it's going to happen. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's incumbent on clubs to put that supporter engagement piece at the front of their mind as soon as these fan-facing issues arise, and that's what we try to do. And it's only when clubs don't really have that in the front of their mind, they leave it to the last minute, they can slow things down. So it really just comes down to the organisation and preparation in terms of the way they go through their various projects they have in action at any one time.
I think the message that's sort of flowing through this conversation is the proactivity of Norwich, and that's how much of an advantage that's brought to the club by making sure that you're proactive in all these measures, making sure that you're, from a financial point of view, you're forecasting not just T+1 and T+2, whatever is legally required. You're looking at T+4, 5, 6, making sure that your regulatory windows are all lined up and making sure you understand what you can spend where you can. And the same with the fan engagement, making sure you're proactive, understand what's coming up, what decisions have we got to make in the future, making sure that we've got the feedback from the fans, or we've approached the fans in a time frame that works with the planning, and making sure everything's structured. Is that something that comes from the top, and is that culture that's embedded across the football club? Speaking to yourselves at a club that's sort of at the best practice end, I'm trying to make sure that for those clubs who are not at this scale of things, have like a tangible way of getting there.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, we have a framework in place with the Canaries Trust, who I mentioned earlier. We entered into, I think originally in 2017, a memorandum of understanding with the Canaries Trust, setting out the framework of how we would work together with them. And we recently updated that a few months back. And that expressly says in that areas where we will engage with them, it expressly calls out issues in relation to the crest, colours, stadium name, moving the stadium. So there is that framework where we've already committed to doing that, and they're so fundamental to the fabric of the club. Of course, you would do that. At the same time, there always needs to be a balance that we are professionals running a football club, and we've got loads of experience across our exec team and throughout the business in doing that. So a level of trust needs to be put into us in terms of running the club in the right way, and our ownership has kind of recently taken full control of the club, but they've been running a baseball team in the MLB for 20 plus years. They know how to engage with fans and run a high performing sports team in a high performing environment that people want to be part of. Whilst I understand the desire to maybe have a golden share in certain aspects, it's probably not the best way of dealing with it, but having that engagement is the best way to go about it, because there will always be things on which supporters and clubs differ, but by having that dialogue, we know the things which are going to be the red lines for the fans, and making sure that we factor those into our decision making.
Is there anything that Norwich City fans can be excited about? What have they got to look forward to?
I think as a starting point, we were fairly proactive at the end of last season in terms of making a change in our football management, and we were really proactive in terms of bringing somebody in as quickly as possible. We brought in Liam Manning and his team from Bristol City, who finished above us last season in the playoffs, and that's kind of a real voting confidence in terms of our strategy and our direction of travel, that somebody will choose to come to us from a rival, and that's been fantastic. I was out at pre-season training camp over the weekend with some other members of our exec team, and there's a real positivity around the group. It's really excited about what we can achieve, and really got some positivity moving into the season. In terms of the transfer window, again, we've been really proactive and brought in some exciting players. Yes, we've lost a really important player in Borja Sainz, but that money's being reinvested in the squad, and we're making sure that we're carrying the momentum into the season to make sure we can hit the ground running. And I think we're really confident that we can be there or thereabouts. So there's a lot for fans to look forward to outside of the playing departments. We're constantly looking at ways we can improve the fan experience and thinking about how we can make match days better, how we can make the stadium better. We're doing lots of little boring jobs, or I say little, some of them are quite significant, over the summer to improve the stadium from an experience perspective, like putting in new kind of coverings on the roof to make sure any leaks that have been complained about have been addressed. We had issues last year with birds fouling in the stadium. We're putting in new netting to deal with that. So it's not glamorous, but as part of that engagement, we've listened to that feedback and we're acting upon it. But then just more substantive stuff that we'd like to do in terms of improving the stadium. Hopefully we'll be in a position to push forward with that soon. Yeah, we're always constantly looking at how to make things better. And ultimately everything we do is either to get improved performance on the pitch or a return on investment in the money that we're putting in through an improved fan experience or an improved partnership experience to increase our revenues, which can then be put back into the squad and ensure that we're in compliance, which we already will be, with either PNS or an SCR model if that comes into force. So yeah, we're all really looking forward to the season and really can't wait to get started.
How deals between yourselves and the partners with the football club? How does the relationship with those work? And why should people get involved in Norwich and support Norwich as an entity to help grow their brand?
There's a few aspects to that. I think traditionally and primarily a lot of our commercial partners have been local and based in East Anglia. We are the only professional sports team, let alone professional football team, in Norfolk. I would say we're the biggest club in East Anglia, which may be not something that our friends down the road would like to hear, but I think that's true. People, going back to what we've discussed throughout this, think that we do things in the right way. So they want to be connected with us. They see what we do within the community. We did an economic study last year, which shows that we add 100 million to the economy locally every year. And we also just try and be kind of a leader in terms of the way we go about things. Everyone would have seen our mental health video we put out a couple of years ago, and that wasn't done in a cynical way. That was done because it's something that we care about. We've done loads of stuff over the years over mental health, and it just happened to go viral, and it was absolutely fantastic. And for partners who want to be involved in football and have kind of a social conscience or a kind of a local imperative, then being involved with us will be really aligned to that. I think in terms of our commercial partnerships, generally all see a really good return on investment, and partners are delighted to work with us, try and do things fairly innovatively in terms of the rights we offer and the way that we work with them. We don't want to just slap a badge on something and leave it at that, or just give them some LED minutes. We're always looking at ways we can activate the partnership to have the maximum impact and get the best value for both the partner and the club. And then alongside that, we're looking at ways we can use partnerships to also provide the provision to our fans, whether that's with food and drink providers, whether that's with service providers, constantly just looking at ways that it can cover all aspects of this, or even partners who can help us on the football sides. I think we're a really good club to be involved with. Our partnership budget is pretty good for the league, I would say. But you can always look to grow it. It's a pretty challenging partnership environment at the moment, because when the economy slows down, budgets are one of the first things to get hit. So we have to work really, really hard to get these deals in. But when we do, they're fantastic. Obviously, we're working with Blakely at the moment, who maybe a year ago when we entered into our front shirt partnership with them, people wouldn't have heard of, but they were announced a few weeks ago as being one of the Times fastest growing 100 companies in the UK. And they're a local Norwich brand that we started talking to, and the partnership's going absolutely fantastically. So there are really good deals to be had if you make sure the club and partner alignment are working productively together. And that's what I feel like we do pretty well.
Thank you so much for your time today, James. We've had a few issues during today's recording. Apologies for anybody that's listening to this. If it hasn't come across right today, I promise we'll do our best to make sure it sounds and looks great in the edit. But really appreciate your time today, James. For those who made it this far in the video, thank you for tolerating all the issues that we've had. Again, just to reiterate, we have a live Q&A with James. For those who want to ask your own questions, want to network with myself and James, please do use the link below to join, and we'd love to network. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, thanks again, James, for coming on. I appreciate your time.